Today I'm going to talk to you about the spiritual genius, the people who spread Islam to Southeast Asia. The spiritual genius is a very interesting group of people. When these spiritual geniuses came to this part of the world, they knew that the Malays held on to ideas of ghosts that was almost similar to the Islamic ideas of the jinn. So they saw that this was an opportunity for them to spread about Islamic conceptions of spirits. So rather than removing many of these beliefs, the spiritual geniuses taught the Malays the Islamic idea of what the spirit is. In Islam, we believe in the idea of the ruh, the soul, the idea of the hereafter, and the idea that the world is also populated by a group of beings called the jinn. What the spiritual genius did was to move the Malays from the belief in things that could also make them forget about the oneness of God to understanding that these beliefs should help us to reinforce the idea of the one true, all-powerful God. There was one issue that the spiritual geniuses were faced with. Malays in the past, before the coming of Islam, used to worship their own ancestors. They believed, and in fact, some of these beliefs still exist until today, that after their ancestors died, their ancestors were actually living with them. And you can still find these beliefs in many communities in Southeast Asia who have already become Muslims. What the spiritual genius did was to explain to the Malays that when someone dies, that person will go to another world, to another alam that was different from ours. Through these explanations, Malays then realized that, hey, Islam did not teach something that was radically different from our beliefs. Rather, what the spiritual geniuses had done was to show to the Malays that Islam had a common conception of this world and the afterworld and the world of spirits, but that these conceptions revolve around the Islamic concept of the oneness of God, or Tauheed. So from the belief in many gods, from the belief in many spirits, and the belief in their ancestors living with them, Malays slowly and progressively became more and more interested and soon enough embracing of the idea of Tauheed. One other thing that these spiritual geniuses did was to replace the worship of tombs, the worship of graveyards that the Malays used to have, to move the Malays to going to a new site of worship. They established a lot of mosques in the region. In a small island like Singapore, you see many different mosques that were established by many of these preachers. So this is the interesting thing, that they changed the Malays, they explained about Islam to the Malays, that appealed largely to their inner spirit, to their inner devotions.